Hey everyone, Nubkeks here. In today's video, I'm going to give you a guide for all of the hard mode bosses in the mythic Operation Mechagon Mega Dungeon. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, or else I'm just an idiot. I don't know. A couple of recommendations before you dive into this. It is a ton of fun. This is an absolute blast. I had a great time, but it is pretty difficult actually, and you're going to want some specific things to do well here. Number one, I'd actually highly recommend a druid of some sort. A resto druid would be ideal, of course, but any sort of druid you can get spec'd into mass entanglement, it's going to make hard modes on the first 4 bosses significantly easier. So definitely bring that. If you can't get that, I'd recommend some other class that has some sort of roots or good roots, maybe a frost mage. I think some shaman can do it with their totems and stuff like that, but again, ideally, probably just bring a druid. And while that is highly recommended, what is for certain absolutely mandatory is to have voice communications. Everybody needs to be able to talk. This is essential when we come to the final boss, King Mechagon, to do his hard mode properly. At least for week 1, probably week 2 maybe as well. There might be weak auras that will help or add-ons that will help later, but for now you need voice communication. Okay, let's dive into the bosses. The first one we did on hard mode was Gunker, probably the hardest of the first 3 to 2 on hard mode. You trigger hard mode, it's whichever boss has the aerial unit flying above it. I do believe it's random. And essentially hard mode on the first 3 bosses is the same thing. Periodically it will drop down 3 electro walkie bots that will do damage to anyone that's on top of them, and they'll leave behind these quite long-lasting puddles of electricity which do damage and slow anyone that moves into them. He'll also randomly target some people with a lightning swirly which explodes for some damage too. So generally speaking, you want to, this is why you want that resto druid or any druid with you. You want to simply just mass entangle, root those electric bots immediately so that they don't spread their electric goop on the ground too far. Just simply step out of the electric swirly as well. Now, the reason that this boss is quite hard, I think this is one of the harder bosses in here, especially on day 1 that we were doing it, where we didn't actually know what the bosses do. But relatively simple when you know what to do. So obviously don't stand in any of the green stuff. The goop is bad. If you touch the goop, you become gooped. You get encased in a block of goop and you have to be broken out. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Any damage priority, always break out people who are gooped. There's going to be 3 squirt bots moving around the area as well. These are the watery bots. You can stand in these, and if you're standing in it, you won't get gooped. They also will clear up the goop. However, they can be gooped themselves by the boss's abilities. If they do get gooped, again, anything that's scooped, prioritize breaking it out. 2 big abilities then to watch out for from the boss. Number 1 is it Coalesce, I think it's called. He sucks all of the pools towards him, so simply make sure that there's no pool behind you when he casts this ability, or just dodge through them to make sure that you don't get gooped. The other one, probably more dangerous, Toxic Wave. This sends out a big old goop donut from the boss, which is undodgeable unless you're in a squirt bot. So you need to be inside a squirt bot to dodge this ability. This is where it gets hard on hard mode because, well, if there's an electric robot running loose and there's an electric robot in the areas that you want to be in to dodge when you're trying to dodge these 2 abilities, or there's electric stuff on the ground that's going to damage you and slow you down, it's pretty bad. So again, just root those as quickly as possible, break out anything that gets gooped, stand in the squirt bots for the toxic wave, and then go to the back, or watch out for things from behind when he sucks all the goop in towards him. The second boss we did in hard mode was Trixie and Naino, I think they're called. So you're fighting 2 of these guys at once. This is quite a bit easier than the previous one. You've got a much bigger arena, so dealing with the robots isn't so bad, and the areas on the ground that they leave aren't that punishing either. But essentially you deal with hard mode the exact same way. You just want to root those robots. I should actually mention, if you don't, for whatever reason, have a group that has any roots, you'll probably want to set up like a stun rotation or knockback rotation, some sort of CC rotation to control these robots at least a little bit on all of these fights. Just to make it much less stressful. The bosses have a few abilities. Trixie just spam casts on the group. At this difficulty, not Mythic Plus, just the baseline hard mode Mythic difficulty, you just want to kick that pretty much whenever you can. I wouldn't even worry about coordinating it too much. It gets dangerous if it stacks multiple times on a player, so just use a defensive if they do get multiple stacks, but just kick it whenever you have a kick available, essentially. The more dangerous thing she does is Megatase. So this is, I think, an 8-second cast. You need to run into the big black dark smoke cloud that the other boss with the motorcycle, unicycle, I don't know what you call it, mechanocycle, leaves behind. Just step into that before she finishes the cast of Megatase, which makes it miss, and then come back out, and you're gonna be fine. Speaking of the guy in the motorcycle, he'll drive his motorcycle around for a little while. Don't get hit by it. It's very easy to dodge. And then when he's not going around in his motorcycle, you just get tanks. He does have a frontal cone attack that hits pretty hard. But yeah, that's basically the boss. It's actually relatively simple. Just, you know, again, keep rooting those ads and dodging the lightning shocks from hard mode. Don't get hit by the motorcycle. Kick her when you can. Step into the smoke cloud. I guess the one thing that could be pretty dangerous is if there is a electric bot overlap on the smoke cloud that you need to step into. In that case, just use a defensive, stand up. Well, you might not even need the defensive. Just stand to the side of the cloud, and then 1 second before she finishes the Megatase class, step inside into the electric stuff inside the cloud, and then step back out again. That's sort of worst case scenario. Oh, and also, make sure you kill both bosses at the same time, because they go berserk if one is still alive, and that's basically it. The third boss that we did on hard mode is the easiest one, I think, actually, in my opinion. It's King Gobamak. We actually put up some raid markers on the things that you can use here. There's 4 electric pylons that you can power up in the fight, and there's also 1 robot, so there's 5 things you can power up, and basically you just want to do that. Again, at this difficulty, you don't need to worry too much about it. So what you want to do is, when the boss reaches 100 energy, he does a charged smash. It's a giant blue AoE in front of him. I think it's targeted on the tank, so just stack everyone up in that. In fact, everyone just stack in melee for this fight all the time anyway. Soak the charged smash, everyone in the group stands in for it, and then you become electrified. It's a bit of a dot on you, doesn't do too much, that's bad. And with that, you can just run over and power up one of the pylons, or power up the robot. The robot will just spin around. The boss keeps summoning in all these mini-trog ads, and that's how you kill them, is you power up these pylons and do that. There's some other stuff, I mean, just don't stand on the bad stuff in the fight as well. Keep rooting the hard mode robots as you normally do. That's quite important, just to make things a little less stressful. But really, the only particularly hard thing about this, I would say, is just watch out for the knockback, the big charge strike knockback that you want to soak. The big charge strike you want to soak. It does do a knockback, so just watch out that you're not knocked back into the hard mode robots, especially when they're self-destructing. That might actually kill you. That's pretty much the only dangerous thing here. And yeah, just kind of ignore the ads. Just let the tank them. I don't even think you need to power up all the pylons. I actually think just 1 powered up is probably enough. On Mythic Plus, you might need to stagger them, but they're actually up for most of the time but between the charge smashes anyway. It's really not too much to worry about. So there you go. That's him. He's very easy. So yeah, have a good time. The 4th boss is the HK8. This is the flying dude that's been harassing you this whole time. Now you get to fight him. So hard mode does a couple of new things here, but it's not too bad either. You'll probably be fine. If you're able to handle the first 3 bosses and you've got roots, this should be fine as well. So one of the first things that changes is that I think the boss normally, on normal mode, targets a single player with a zap ability. On hard mode, he makes it a big AoE soak. It's really obvious and visible. So this is pretty simple. Again, just like the last boss, King Gobamak, you just want to stack in melee all the time and just soak this as 5 people, and it's super easy to do. There's big cannon blasts. These are giant blue electric swirlies through the middle of the area. Simply move out of these. The other hard mode mechanic in this phase of the fight is those robots, the walkie robots that you've been dealing with all the times now. They're back, but this time they have these lightning links going between them. These do a lot of damage. I think they do about something between 50 and 70,000 damage every 1/3 of a second that you stand in them, which is a lot. So don't stand in the lightning links. You're going to have plenty of space. It's really not that bad. Again, just root these, lock them down. I imagine this would actually be very hard if if you didn't have roots. So watch out for it. Again, you could stun rotation on them otherwise. If you need to, you can run through the lightning links. Just run through them quickly. You'll take 1 tick of damage, which hurts, but it's bearable. And that's most of it for phase 1. Now you've got phase 2. And on this one, you have to identify, there's 1 of 2 side areas, and there'll be a big lightning thing going to it. It'll be all lit up, so you'll know which one to go to. And you have to do a gauntlet, so there's going to be vents on the floor. If you stand in the vent when it's lit, you're going to take damage, get stunned. Don't do that. In the early part of it, there's a spinny tower thingy. If you walk into the beams, you're going to be sent back to the start of the gauntlet. And then there's also these little red spinny robots, and if you walk near them, you're going to, again, be teleported back to the start. So the goal is to get to the end, dodge all the stuff, don't get hit by any of it, and then when you get there, you need to channel on the big structure in the middle. Every second that any player is channeling, it starts draining its energy, and you need to just drain it all before the boss finishes his cast. And the hard mode difference is that this is much shorter. So essentially, you want to get through with... We barely made it on this one. Before we made some mistakes, but basically if everyone gets through the gauntlet and doesn't make any mistakes, maybe one person can get sent back to the start. You'll still make it, I think, pretty comfortably. So just click on the thing, channel, and dodge the robots and whatever, then get back and burst the boss. And we didn't have the best DPS on this. I think if you've got good DPS, you'll just kill him in one cycle. The boss himself becomes vulnerable for, I think, 30 seconds, casting Haywire. After that, you can even damage him while he's taking off as well. If you don't kill him, like we didn't, unfortunately, you have to do the fight again. Basically, you have to do a second cycle. So yeah, I'd expect if you got good DPS, you'll only need one cycle. And that's the boss. All right, now the next boss is Cujo. This one's actually really hard as well. I forgot to say, actually, so with the first three bosses, obviously you're activating their hard mode by just whichever one the dude is flying over. The fourth boss, he is hard mode just simply if you did the first three on hard mode, he's automatically hard mode. This boss, to trigger hard mode, there's a pile of poop to the left of the door you come in. You need to click on the poop and throw it in the furnace, and that activates hard mode. And what hard mode does is there's poop on the arena that applies a stacking slow. This stacks up to 16 times, and it's an 80% slow at maximum. And this makes what is otherwise an extremely easy boss actually quite hard. So yeah, there you go. I think we were experimenting a bit on this, and I think that you can pick up the pieces of poo on the ground and throw them in the furnace during the fight to remove the slow, but then it explodes and does a lot of damage. This seems to me to be harder than it's worth, unless we were missing something, which is possible. We just did the fight with just living with the 80% slow. It's doable, and it's not that bad. So what happens with this boss, pretty straightforward. There's a tank debuff that needs to be dispelled, does a big chunk of damage to the group. It's not too dangerous. The more dangerous thing is the explosive leaps. So the explosive leap, I think it targets 3 people, and the boss will leap onto each one of those and explode around it. This is bad if they hit each other, so you need to spread out, make sure you don't hit each other. You also need to make sure that you don't drop this on the boxes. If you drop it on the boxes, you're in big trouble. Boxes will periodically drop down. This may be bugged. I'm not sure. The time we killed it, we didn't get a box or one of the venting flames, which is pretty bad. You need to save defensives if that ever happens, because then it gets really bad. You need big healing throughputs. Venting flames, essentially, it's a big 5-second cast by the boss, big wind up, and then he does a massive AoE channel to the raid group or the group. You simply need to stand behind a normal box to avoid this. When a box gets used, it then becomes big, glowing, and red. You don't want to stand behind this anymore. When he casts an X venting flames, it explodes and knocks back anyone near it. So just don't be near the big red boxes. They suck. But yeah, what you just need to do with this is you need to tank the boss near the box that you're going to use to dodge the next venting flames. Because with an 80% slow, it's quite hard to get behind it. You want the range to get into the side of the box, so that you can simply walk behind the box when he does venting flames. Just move early, move quickly, and then he usually does this leaping strike right after the venting flames. So after you've stacked up for the box, just split up, drop the explosive things, don't drop them on each other, and then stack up behind the box after that. Healing isn't too bad, really. Obviously, no one gets hit by the venting flames. You've got the tank thing, which can be awkward with some overlaps. You can get line of sighted as well by the boxes. But you do have quite a lot of free healing time during the venting flames. It's actually, ironically, the safest part of the encounter because everyone's just stacked up there. There's nothing to do. And that's it. Yeah, so just make sure explosively managing that really is the most important thing. You need to make sure not to drop it on a box. If you do, it's going to light the box up and the box is going to explode and the venting flames will hit you. And there you go. Yeah, it'll take maybe a little getting used to play with 80% slow, but once you do, you'll be fine. Okay, and the final boss of the instance, and definitely the hardest hard mode boss here, is King Mechagon. And this is the boss where you really want to have voice communication to handle this. To activate hard mode, simply press the big red button when you come in. It doesn't trigger the boss fight, so you can press it before or while you're setting up for the pull. The hard mode mechanic of this is quite difficult. Every 45 seconds, you're going to have to handle this. If you can see it on my boss frames here in the fight, there's an annihilation bot. This is hard mode. He has 100 energy and it ticks down. Once he hits 35 energy, he's going to flash a sequence of panels. These are 4 panels around near the entrance of the room. You can see these before the pull. They'll all be lit up with a red skull. When he hits 35 energy, he's going to flash a sequence. He's going to activate each of these 4 panels one by one. And you need to remember the activation order. They also have a color. The color doesn't matter. Nothing to do with the color. It's the activation order that matters. Then what happens when the boss, when the annihilation bot gets to 11 energy, you have 5 seconds to activate these panels in the order that they flashed up a few seconds before. If you click these in the correct order within those 5 seconds, congratulations, he resets to 100 energy and you're now safe for another 45 seconds or so. So yeah, this is pretty intense. The way you're going to need to do this is you're going to need to assign a player to each one of the panels, 1 player per panel, and they're going to need to ensure that they get to their panel maybe 1 or 2 seconds before the boss hits 11 energy and you're able to input the code into the panels. Okay, in phase 1, we recommend a tank and a 3 DPS do this. In phase 2, the tank can't do it. He needs to tank the boss at the window. So in phase 2, recommend that the healer takes over and does the tank spot. Because it's not so bad on the healer in phase 2 in terms of movement. Recommend having 1 player call this out. I'd say probably easiest just to have a DPS do it. And they can just do it consistently throughout the entire fight. And the way we did it was we had that DPS player call out the order as it came up so that all the players had a rough idea of what their spot in the order would be. And then once the panels became activatable, to call out to the people to do it. Now, this depends on how well coordinated your group is. What we decided to do was to have a callback system. So, for example, we called out the classes. You could also call out a number, assign a number to the panels. You can kind of do whatever you want. What we did would be do something like say, okay guys, panels are coming up. Warlock, Paladin, Druid, Priest. Okay, cool. And then once they become activatable, say, what was the order? I've already forgotten. But let's say it was Warlock. Warlock would press his button and then say yes once he's pressed the button. Paladin, click the button, yes. Druid, click the button, yes. Priest. So the callback would basically let the other person, the next person in the sequence, know that it was safe for them to press their button. We had a few wipes because, the caller would call, Paladin, Warlock, and then the Paladin would go, oh no, well, I don't think it was actually a Paladin problem, but, in theory, one of the players would go, oh no, sorry, I was slightly delayed, I had to dodge an orb or something, and I didn't get to click my thing yet, so it just makes it a little bit more stressful. It depends how comfortable your team is with calling stuff, but essentially you just need to click the buttons in the right order, and just get comfortable with doing that. I'd say just remain calm. That's probably the most important thing with this. Remain calm, don't panic, and just call it out one by one, and you're gonna be good. I recommend watching, there's like a good video called, it was like Bomb Disposal Experts Play Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. That's a good inspiration for how to communicate well if you want some inspiration. Now, the other mechanics you have to deal with that make this kind of hard. Okay, so consistent throughout the entire phase are the plasma orbs. And every time the boss casts recalibration, they move. So there's 4 orbs. Whenever he casts recalibration, they target a new player, and then the orb zaps over to that player. They'll have an arrow coming out showing which direction they're going to move. The orbs themselves have a smallish hitbox, actually. They're not so bad. But when they do recalibrate, when they do move, they do an electric pulse at the area that they hit, which does some damage. More importantly, it does a knockback. Okay, the knockback is dangerous. It can knock you off the platform, but also quite importantly, because these the panels you have to click are at the edge of the platform, the orbs can really ruin your day, right? They can really ruin your day because if the orb is at the edge, at the panel, and it moves, it can hit you while it's moving, or it can end on the panel. So basically what you have to do is you want to bait these orbs towards the middle of the room. What this means is that you do not stand beside your panel until maybe 1 to 2 seconds before it's time for you to click your panel, right? So you want to be, if you're ranged, you want to be at the boss hitting the boss. If you're ranged, you want to be in the middle of the room. If you're melee, you want to be at the boss. Then you want to move over to your panel to do the input sequence about 2 seconds before it's time to do it. This way, that means that the orbs are not going to be at the panels, and they're not going to hopefully target you when you're at the panel, because that's when things get a little bit scary. Okay, that's when things get a bit scary. That's essentially all you do with that, though, right? You just want to dodge the orbs and try not to bait them so that they're going to hit you during the panel activation sequence. In phase 1, with positioning, this is quite important. We were tanking the boss at the front of the left side of the room, and then we had the healer at the front of the right side of the room. Basically have the healer on the opposite side of the room to the boss. This is because his big mechanic is takeoff, and he does a cutting beam. So the boss goes into the sky, and then he fires a laser beneath him, and he chases the nearest player. This pulses party damage, just AoE, and it also does a ton of damage if anyone gets hit by the beam, so you need to kite him around. And this is why we have the healer and the tank on opposite sides. It means that the healer is never going to get chased, or if he does get chased, the cast will end by the time he gets to the healer. And this just means that the healer is safe to keep people topped up, which is important. The other mechanic that happens in phase 1 is, I think it's like Giga Zap or something like that. He basically targets a single player, and then he hits them really, really hard. So if it's a DPS player or the healer, it probably does about 2/3 of their health. So if they are a bit low, it could just kill them. You essentially want to make sure that people are topped up before they're Giga Zapped. If it hits the tank, you're happy. So yeah, that's what we did with that. And that's why we have the tank does one of the panels. We want to have the healer focus on keeping people topped up in phase 1 so that they don't die. With the cutting beam, another tip, you can kite it in a little bit of like a U-shaped turn, because this will overlap with the panels. Certainly the first panel press will come pretty quickly after the boss does the cutting beam or during it. So you can have the tank just, starting the boss on the front and the left, tank him in a little circle towards the middle, and then back towards his panel where he needs to go, and he should be at his panel in time, and the cutting beam will expire, and you're all going to be happy, and that's great, and it's over. Final thing for phase 1 to really watch out for, okay, is that the Annihilation bot, the input countdown sequence, still happens during transition from phase 1 to phase 2. And the transition from phase 1 to phase 2 includes an 8-second stun on the entire party. You do not want to be stunned when you need to be inputting the panels, or you're going to wipe. You're going to wipe. So you need to hold DPS potentially on the boss. You just need to push him when the Annihilation bot has high energy. Do not push him if he's close to doing the input sequence, or you're gonna be mega screwed. In phase 2, you're still dealing with the orbs the same way. Then there's a couple of changed mechanics or new mechanics. So the Giga Zap, or whatever it's called in this one, it now targets 3 players, and it does this big, huge line on the floor. It's pretty simple because you're going to be spread around anyway. You just essentially want to make sure that you don't drop this on any other player. It will do 3 players in a row. I believe usually it targets 3 players in a row, different players. So just drop each one safely. Just don't run around like crazy. Just stay calm. You're going to be kind of naturally spread anyway. The tank can just drop, if he gets targeted, the tank can just drop it like off into the side, into the wall, so it'll never hit anybody. And then you can have the 2 people assigned to the left panels, drop them on the left. The 2 people assigned to the right panels, drop them on the right. And just heal people up. It's not so bad at all. The other mechanic is more dangerous. It's the magnetic arm. So he throws down an arm at a random spot on the floor it lasts for, I think, 8 or 9 seconds, and it sucks people towards it. It also does a lot of damage, especially if you're close to it. This is pretty dangerous, especially if this overlaps with the input sequence. This is really nasty. So I would save large personal defenses for dealing with this arm. The healer can't really heal if you're like me, I did it as a holy priest. There's very few spells I can actually cast while moving. Okay, if you have a resto druid, you're probably okay, because they can still do quite a bit of healing while moving, or any other healer with good mobility healing. But any low mobility healer will struggle to keep people topped up during this, so you want to save like nice defensives to try keep people alive, because this can get kind of dangerous. And save personal defensive too. You're not going to need healing cooldowns for other parts of the fight. I'd recommend just making sure people are topped up coming into this phase for sure. And yeah, that's how you deal with that. But definitely make sure to save the personal defensive in case that you have to go near the magnetic arm to input your sequence, right? If you don't do the sequence, you're all dead. It wipes. It's an insta wipe. So that takes kind of priority over everything. But yeah, that's basically this boss. It's quite hard. It takes quite a bit of getting used to. Best tip, stay calm while you're calling. Just stay calm, stay cool. Don't be at your panels ahead of time, so you bait the orbs to safe places. Then move to your panel about 2 seconds before it's ready to be input. And then have someone call out the inputs, someone who's calm and consistent. Just call it out. In phase 1, tank the boss to the side, healer to the other side. Tank does it. In phase 2, the tank just tanks the boss, can't really do much, and the healer takes over doing their panel. Pretty straightforward. And then save, healing cooldowns and defensives for probably the magnetic arm in phase 2, because that could potentially be the nastiest bit. Make sure you don't get hit by 2 gigazaps, or you will get one shot as well. And that's basically it. There you go, guys. That's the fight. Good luck. And yeah, enjoy the mount. You get a guaranteed mount drop. If none of you are locked out of the dungeon, I suppose. We're doing this in hard mode each week. And a guaranteed 430 Azerite helmet as well. So yeah, enjoy.